All right, Gerri is a diabetes nurse at the BC Diabetes Clinic in Vancouver. She obtained her master's in nursing at UBC and later went on to become a certified diabetes educator in 1998. Since then, she has continued to maintain her certification and has served on the examination committee for the Canadian Diabetes Educators Certification Board. And she is a past executive of the Vancouver chapter of the Diabetes Association Educators section. She has also served as an editor for multiple journals, including the Diabetes Communicator and the Canadian Journal of Diabetes. Gerri has both a professional and personal interest in the care offered to persons who live with diabetes. Given her wealth of knowledge and her consistent drive to go above and beyond to care for and educate others about diabetes, it's no surprise that Diabetes Canada named her as the Diabetes Nurse Educator of the Year in 2020. She was also the recipient of the 2023 Nurses and Nurse Practitioners of British Columbia Award of Excellence in Advancing Nursing Knowledge and Research. We are very lucky to have her here tonight to answer your questions about T1D carriers and coverage. I'll hand it off to Gerri now for a presentation.
Good to see everyone. I have a short PowerPoint, but I hope there's lots of questions. The world of insurance is really fraught with lots of questions and lots of variables that aren't always easy to see. So I hope to demystify it some for people in BC, for folks who live with diabetes. Basically, you need to know what is paid for, what it's not, and how to make it work. And sometimes you can, just by doing a few things, see how it goes. Next slide. So basically, the trick to know is what is covered under your private medical insurance. Not all plans cover all things. Some companies cover some medications and devices, and others don't. Some companies, it depends on the plan. So Blue Cross Plan 1 may cover everything 100%, but Plan 2 not. It's very careful. You've got to be very careful to read the fine print. The other thing you need to know is what is your deductible? And do you have a max for the year or a max for a lifetime? With the cost of the medical devices for diabetes, I had one gentleman in my practice that found out he had a $25,000 lifetime max, and he went on an insulin pump and pretty much blew half of it in less than 2 years. You have to be respectful of those caps and make sure you keep an eye on it. The question then becomes, should you purchase private health insurance? We're going to look at that today. Next one. So there's private versus public health insurance. Private is usually offered through an employer. Different companies have very similar plans. It depends, each company has different rules. For instance, some pay the pharmacies and the medical device companies directly, whereas others will only reimburse you. Some always have a deductible, some do not, and it's important to read the fine print. The amount of coverage depends on the plan. It usually has some type of a deductible. Blue Cross, for instance, often only pays 80%. The maximum annual spend is often seen with something like Green Shield, and approved benefits is throughout for all of the plans. Most private can be purchased by individuals, but we're going to look at whether or not that's a good idea. Fair Pharmacare is the provincial health plan. Every province has it. Alberta, as far as I can tell, has the slimmest plan. I think is a polite way to put it. They don't have a huge amount of coverage for medical devices or for medications. In BC, you must have medical health insurance, MSP, but you must register separately for Fair Pharmacare. To register for Fair Pharmacare, you must have done your taxes within the last 2 years. Otherwise, you will not be registered for Fair Pharmacare. And I'm always surprised at how often that comes to be a problem. If you don't have taxes and sign the consent to have Fair Pharmacare look at your taxes, you will not be covered for medications. So first thing to do is look at your taxes. You can check to see if you are registered. When this came about, I think it was about 1997, 1998, when they started Fair Pharmacare and you needed to register. Many people did and then have forgotten that they had registered. And you can check your own registration. If you have not registered for Fair Pharmacare, I urge you to do it because you never know when you're going to need it. Fair Pharmacare, of course, pays for approved prescription drugs, pays for dispensing fees, no matter what the dispensing fee, and some medical devices and supplies. It is always based on income. Fair Pharmacare has 2 deductibles. It's called an individual and then a family deductible. You can live alone and still have a family deductible. Next one. If you have no private insurance, should you purchase private? We're going to look at Tom's case. Next one. So Tom is a 56-year-old gentleman. He lives alone. He's employed full-time. He has high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. He earns about $75,000 annually. He has private full insurance through his workplace. His individual deductible is $2,250 and his family is $3,000. His private insurance is a really great plan, no deductible, no maximum, and they pay the pharmacy. Tom enjoys life. Because Tom's plan is so well endowed, his private insurance actually pays his deductible for Fair Pharmacare. Fair Pharmacare doesn't care if the tooth fairy pays their deductible as long as it's covered. With this, Fair Pharmacare would make or your private health insurance would want to make sure that you have all your special authority, all of the medications are approved so that once the deductible is paid, the private plan is off the hook. Green Shield is known for only covering things that Fair Pharmacare covers. Most of their plans will not cover another medication that Fair Pharmacare doesn't cover. Whereas Blue Cross often has plans that go outside of Fair Pharmacare. It depends on what your employer has purchased. Next slide. So Tom unfortunately suffers a job loss because his company went bankrupt. However, he's able to find another job quickly with a pretty much the same salary. So he still has the same Fair Pharmacare deductible, but he has to pay for it himself. He wonders if he should buy a private plan rather than going it alone. The individual deductible is, of course, the highest amount. Once the individual deductible is paid, Fair Pharmacare kicks in 70%. Of course, it's only for approved medications. So for instance, Fiasp, Humalog, U200 insulins are not covered. Many restrictions on devices, such as insulin pumps, Fair Pharmacare will only cover Omnipod and occasionally some of the others, but it's really very difficult to get approved. You always have to have special authority for things like CGM or insulin pumps. If you go out and get it ordered and then you get it without the approval, you can't go back and get the approval. You're out of luck. Family deductible is assessed even if you live alone. When the family deductible is completed, then the approved medications are paid 100% by Fair Pharmacare. Next. So there are some worrisome and annoying details with Fair Pharmacare, or with, not Fair Pharmacare, I'm sorry, with the private insurance plans. If you look at the private insurance plans, they seem to cover a lot of things. And I was looking at it the other day and thinking, there are a lot of options, but the things that you would use the most have the most restrictions. For instance, dental is very restrictive. Medication are very restrictive, but there seem to be a lot of options for counseling. Vision and physio is restrictive. Hearing wasn't as restrictive, but how many of us would go for hearing tests? We would all probably need the dentist, but those are very restrictive. Some include life insurance, others have disability insurance. Usually they're more expensive. Next slide. Green Shield. So I looked at the private plans to see what they had. So there was the one for $198 monthly, and those are for plans with high prescription coverage, but each application is individually assessed. Medications for ongoing basis or pre-existing medical conditions are frequently excluded. So if you're buying a Green Shield monthly plan that costs you about $200 a month, your CGM probably would not be covered, nor would your insulins. For plans with low prescription coverage, acceptance for these things is guaranteed, but it only pays 80% up to $500 for the first year, $650 in year 2, and $800 in year 3. You have to do the math to see if that would cover, that would make sense if you would actually save any money doing this. The monthly premium for low prescription coverage is only $120, but it may not make sense if you're paying the extra 20%. You may actually, when you buy private, you may end up spending more money than if you just did it the other way. Frequently as well, with the private plans, you have to keep paying even when your Fair Pharmacare deductible is finished. So Tom, once his $2,250 or $3,000 for family is finished, Green Shield would stop paying for him, but he would still have to pay $198 for one plan or $119 for the other. So you really need to do the math to see if these private plans are going to save you any money. It may be that not having a private plan actually saves you more money than having one. Next slide. Blue Cross, there are acceptance guarantees plans, and they're fairly expensive. A lot of them do not, they're assessed on an individual basis. Most Blue Cross do not cover pre-existing conditions, but they do include some dental, vision, etc. So for essential, it's $600 annually, but there's a prescription cap. So you spend $600 on a plan that has a $350 prescription cap, you keep paying after your deductible is finished, and Blue Cross is off the hook. Bronze, it's more, and the prescription cap stays at $350. Silver is $1,200 annually, but the prescription cap goes up by $150. So it doesn't always make sense. You very much have to sit down and do the math. Next one. Oftentimes when people ask me if they should go ahead and buy a plan, I talk about the Fair Pharmacare, because unfortunately, it's the only one that will somewhere through the year not cost. And it is not going to kick you off or deny you coverage if you get things improved. Making Fair Pharmacare work is sometimes difficult, but you can do it. If your family income has dropped in the last year, it used to be that you could only ask for a review of your deductible once a year before February. Now you can ask for a review at any time. You do need to sign a consent. So once you've signed the consent, usually to have the review, it's about 6 weeks. And some of my patients have had their deductible go straight down to almost nothing. BC says that if you make under $30,000 a year, you have no deductible. That's not quite true. You still have a $400 family deductible, but it's a lot less if you were employed and you've lost your job and your income is drastically reduced. At least it will be reduced for you. You can ask to get your deductible paid over a monthly basis. So instead of being hit right away with huge bills in January when the deductible rolls over, you can amortize your deductible over the 12 months. When your deductible is completed, stockpile. It's the only way to do it. So if your deductible finishes in July, you make sure that you keep medications, and in December, you make sure that you order and get your 3-month supply to get you past January. If your deductible is completed, then you get your medications for free. Always make sure your healthcare provider has applied for special authority. And frequently, the healthcare provider will have said that they've applied. You can phone Fair Pharmacare and ask if you have special authority. Ask if it's been requested. If it hasn't been requested, then go back to your healthcare provider. One of the problems with special authority is that it depends on which doctor is writing the prescription. So for instance, for Lantus or for Basaglar now, if an endocrinologist writes that prescription, they don't need to apply for special authority. However, if your family doctor writes the prescription for Basaglar, then that family doctor does need to apply for special authority. If you want to make sure that your devices or your medications are going towards your deductible, phone Fair Pharmacare and ask, does this medication or device need special authority? Has it been applied for? If it hasn't been, ask if it needs to be. Often I find that they sometimes forget that endocrinologists can write the Basaglar prescription and it doesn't need special authority, and it takes some convincing by phoning Fair Pharmacare. You have to have a lot of patience phoning Fair Pharmacare, and I would suggest you have a speakerphone because you might be waiting an hour and a half. They take a long time. You can look up online which devices and prescriptions need special authority, but I find phoning Fair Pharmacare is the best way. Last thing, and this is controversial, but only use medications that go towards Fair Pharmacare. Your pharmacist often is able to help you, but phoning the Fair Pharmacare yourself works. I saw a note in the chat that I was talking about CGMs. CGMs, the way they rolled it out was just a disaster. They rolled out Dexcom and had everyone apply and only gave everyone 1 year. And then they introduced Freestyle Libre and suggested that you needed to apply for that. Now they've changed that and said that if you've got coverage for Dexcom, you can have a Dexcom G7 or a Freestyle. The first special authority is 1 year. And then the second time you get special authority, it's for 5 years. I know in our own clinic, we have so many people that we don't keep track of when people's special authority is going to wear out. So heads up, find out when your special authority is due so that you can get on someone to get it for you. You don't want to end up having picked up your Freestyle or Dexcom and spent huge amount of money and found out that it didn't go towards your deductible. Ask your pharmacist. If you go to the pharmacist and say, did this go towards my deductible? If he or she says no, leave it at the pharmacy, get on your physician. The special authority for Basaglar and for CGMs only takes a couple of hours. We send them in and we get them back really quickly. So make sure you have it before you pay for it. Next one. Compare prices. You'd be surprised at the prices. Costco dispensing fee is $4.95. Shoppers is $14. Often, if you're paying 80 or they're paying 80%, you're paying 20%, doesn't seem like a lot. But if you're paying $14 for every prescription, that's a lot. Comes to a fair bit. Same with Freestyle. Freestyle is $90 at Costco. And by the way, you do not need a Costco membership to get to the pharmacy. They don't like it, but you can get into the pharmacy to get Costco to have access. Shoppers Drug Mart is more expensive. So really phone around, save yourself some money. Next. I'm looking at it. Okay. Any questions? And I see we've got a pharmacist online who can help with the questions.
I can go through now the questions that were submitted ahead of time by the audience here and go through the Q&A.
Sounds good.
And then any other questions can be put in the chat and we can go through those afterwards. All right, so the first kind of section we'll be doing is comparing insurance providers. So Katie said, I've found when trying to get any kind of private insurance, not through an employer or spouse, that they won't cover any T1D supplies because it's a pre-existing condition. Any advice on providers that actually offer semi-decent coverage?
I have not found one. You see these advertising on TV, you read the brochures, and it sounds like, why wouldn't you get it? And I have not found one that provides enough coverage for pre-existing conditions, even if it's not pre-existing. I had one gentleman who bought private insurance because he needed counseling or something, I don't know. And he then became type 1 and they wouldn't cover it. They seemed to have it on a case-by-case basis. Insurance companies are there to make money, not to take care of you. So that you have to be very savvy You know, you have to be a wise shopper. And frequently the private insurance for an ongoing basis is not worth it. Travel insurance is one thing, but for ongoing needs, it's not going to pay.
Right. Thank you, Gerri. Katie, if you're on the call, would you like to follow up, or I'll also open up to Elizabeth if you wanted to add anything?
I think most of the plans that we deal with and we bill at the pharmacy are almost exclusively work insurance plans. Very rarely do we have anyone come in who has purchased private insurance, and it may be for non-diabetics, but for diabetics, it's just such a hassle to see whether you're actually going to benefit from your limited coverage that you would get from it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All right.
Are we getting some feedback? Okay.
Yeah, it was just coming from Elizabeth, I believe, but it is muted through there. The next question here is from Martin. It says, I am covered under group health insurance. How does that company rate for T1D healthcare in comparison to other BC providers?
It very much depends on the plans. If he has a plan, you know, that pays all of his deductible, I don't know what Elizabeth would say, and I'll have her answer afterwards. I find all of them are pretty much the same. Their policy on whether or not they pay directly, whether or not they have a deductible, seem to be the differences. But whether or not they're going to pay for your devices or your medications, they seem to be fairly equal. They don't, you know, one isn't any much better than the other. Elizabeth?
There's a challenge I find, especially like if you're on a pump or if you're on any devices, is that we have our prescription drug coverage and your lifetime or your yearly maximum for that. But then there's another section that we don't often get told about, and it's submitting it almost as a manual expense for your as a medical supply or a diabetic supply. And sometimes your percentage back can change. So say my test strips would be covered 80% through if I billed them directly at the pharmacy, but if I submitted them as a medical supply, they might be reimbursed at 100%. It's just that extra step of sending it in and then waiting for it to get deposited back. And for a lot of the Medtronic pump supplies that we can bill in the pharmacy, it's the same thing. Either it doesn't bill directly and you have to submit it, but then when you submit it, see, like read the fine print of your plan to see which one you would get the best amount back for. And especially for the lifetime maximums, like is that your $25,000 drugs, but then you have another $10,000 as a medical expense that you have as a lifetime maximum. So it really pays to read the fine print and call the insurance plans. If we call from the pharmacy, they don't often give us any of that information. But if you can wait on the line and call them, then it makes your planning, your financial planning a lot easier.
A couple of things. The physician cannot find out what your deductible is, cannot find out, and neither can the pharmacist, cannot find out whether or not you're close to the deductible. All of the phone calls have to be through you. My advice is try to do it on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, because Monday and Friday are horrible, and have lots of time to sit on the phone. Other places I see in Alberta, they have different ways, and I know in Ontario, they have different ways. So the medical device program gets more things for people with fewer deductions, but BC doesn't have that. So definitely give them a call, Fair Pharmacare a call, see what's covered. And if you are covered through a employer for private, phone to make sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Gerri and Elizabeth. Martin, I see you're on the call here. Did you want to follow up at all about your question? No. All right. So our last question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, Caleb. Yeah, no, I really appreciate the insight that you're able to provide with. I guess doing the homework is what Gerri's really coming from. Yeah, I guess we all can learn. I can certainly learn from that. Is that doing the homework, especially with regard to what is covered and what's not covered, is going to mitigate the prospect of coming across awkward expenses that you didn't really anticipate you would be encountering. And the more homework we can do as T1Ds, I guess the better, really.
This sounds like overkill, but I've had it happen where I've tried to phone with the patient in my office, and most providers won't do that with you. However, frequently you get hold of the insurance companies and need things answered. So some of my patients have started sitting in the waiting room and phoning the companies, and when they hit a question, then they can ask us. So it's everything from the DIN number for a particular device, and we would have that very quickly, to whether or not the office has submitted the forms as yet for special authority, and they could hand it to you. And I know it seems a little bit much, but sometimes that's the fastest way to get the answers.
I value your insight, Gerri. I guess going forward, with regard to the fact I do have group health as my healthcare provider, but I will be on Fair Pharmacare in due course. From what you said also, that I find it really insightful, it's the fact that who can prescribe the drug going forward may, whether it's an endocrinologist or whether it's a GP or whoever, may influence whether that's going to be reimbursed by Fair Pharmacare or not. And that's something maybe for all of us to bear in mind. It's a bit of a numbers game, and the more homework I guess we can do, is what you're saying, the better we'll be off. Would that be correct, Gerri?
That is correct. Now, some pharmacies, if an endocrinologist has ordered it once, they will put it through that endocrinologist, even if the family doctor orders it. But some do not, and the patients will come to us and say, it was going through my deductible at one point, and now it's not. And when I look at Medinet and find out it was the family doctor, then they got stuck with a bill. So if you get there, you ask your pharmacist if it did go through Fair Pharmacare, and if it didn't, you might want to give it a day or two to find out why. You want every cent that you spend to go towards your deductible, because when it's finished, you're getting your supplies and your medications basically for free through your taxes.
That's a real insight, and thank you very much for that, Gerri.
Excellent. I will move into the last question in this section, which was submitted by Anonymous. And it says, what is a good way to go about searching for an insurance provider if you don't have experience with private insurance? Is paying for private insurance worthwhile? Which insurance providers generally offer better coverage for diabetes supplies than others?
I had better news. If you think of all insurance companies as pretty much offering the same product, there isn't a better one. There may be one that's easier to work with because they pay the pharmacy directly, but there isn't a better one that gives a more lucrative or more coverage with fewer restrictions. It's whether or not they're just easier to work with. And the plans, so some Blue Cross, group health, Green Shield plans are really quite generous, and some are stingy as all get out. But you have to really look at your plan. When I was getting ready for this, and I have a bias, I think, as well. When I was getting ready for this, I really wanted to try to convince myself that there were at least some plans that kind of made sense. But I still struggle to find one. I haven't found a plan that I thought that would be of benefit. I would recommend that one. For the most part, really look at what's included. And if you're not going to use most of it, then spend your money wisely. Spend it on something else and just pay the deductible. The people who kind of fall through the cracks, the people like Tom, who has a deductible of $3,000, he will get some benefit. He probably shouldn't get a plan because it'll cost him more than the deductible. But the people who have a $6,000 or $7,000 deductible are pretty much on the hook for the whole thing. You have to work it out to do the math to see if it makes any sense to spend $200 a month, $2,400 for the year on something that's going to give you a maximum of $500 for prescription, and see if you're going to use the little bit of dental, the counseling, the physio. It might make sense, but oftentimes it doesn't. Remembering insurance companies are there to make money.
Thank you, Gerri. If whoever asked that question wants to ask anything further, I'll open that up for you. Or Elizabeth, I see you're unmuted if you'd like to comment on that as well.
It's not a big thing, but just kind of experience of dealing with like the Canada Life and Sun Life and Assure and Express Scripts and Blue Cross and Green Shield. Blue Cross is the plan that mimics what pharmacare does for special authorities. Any other plan, sometimes they'll have these drugs must be authorized messages that come back to us, so that you might still need your pharmacare special authority, but then you need an extra plan in order to get that drug covered under them. Ozempic is the great example. We're not even going to get into that, but that has so many loopholes and extra plan covered. But Blue Cross is pretty much, they will cover what pharmacare covers. They will exclude what pharmacare covers. Sometimes through, if you have 100% coverage right off the bat with Blue Cross, you might have less loopholes. But there, in terms of ease, if you understand pharmacare's rules, you will understand Blue Cross's rules for the most part, with some exceptions. And I don't know for kind of manually submit Blue Cross whether that's any different, but Pay Direct, they pay the same for we have to be a certain way through our one supply before we can bill the next supply. So all those percentages with Blue Cross are exactly the same as what they are for pharmacare. So there's no guessing that way whether it'll go to one plan but not to another plan.
Often you have to prove I know with Green Shield, and Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, you have to prove to the insurance company that you do have the special authority, so that I've been sending out the special authority to patients so that they can forward it to their insurance, so that they've got it in their hand when they're asking.
Great. Thank you, guys. I will move us into the next section here, which is pharmacare coverage. So the first question here is from Robin, who said, can you explain BC pharmacare and what constitutes as contributing to the deductible and what does not? How to make the most of it when you don't have private medical?
Should I take this one?
Oh, you're muted, Gerri. Sorry. Elizabeth, either of you can go ahead there.
With pharmacare, we have we have an income-based deductible. So the higher your income, the higher your deductible is. Your family is all in the same deductible pot. So you all contribute up to the first phase deductible. After you've hit the first tier, the first phase deductible, you have either 70% or 80% coverage, depending if you're over 65 or under 65, up until the second tier. Once you hit the second tier, then you're 100% covered until the end of the calendar year on all of the eligible drugs, assuming they haven't been filled too soon, which then excludes them from counting towards your deductible. So say you have a $25,000 a year family income, you guys have no deductible right off the bat, and you should have 70 or 80% coverage, or with some exceptions, you'll have 100% coverage right off the bat. But if you filled a 3-month supply and then you came to me in 45 days and said, can I get another 3-month supply? They wouldn't pay for any of it. So you have to be 80% of the way through in order to be eligible for your next supply with PharmaCare and have your special authority in place.
If you had special authority for a Dexcom and choose to move over to Freestyle Libre, we have found that as long as you have waited the 3 months, if you got 3 months of Dexcom and wanted to try the Freestyle instead, as long as you're 80% through your Dexcom, you can switch to Freestyle without getting a second special authority. Fair PharmaCare seems muddled on that, but I phoned several times about it, and it seems that's where they're going with it now. As long as you have CGM special authority in place and haven't gone over the 3 or haven't ordered too soon, you can switch from one to the other.
Okay. Thank you, Gerri and Elizabeth. I will also see if Robin's on the call and if you'd like to follow up with your question at all. All right, so our next question here is from David. Said, any updates on when the deductibles can be waived for T1D?
I know that Dr. Elliott has had a ongoing battle, an ongoing discussion to get that waived. So far, it hasn't happened. Yeah, it's
you,
no, it's too bad. I'm of two minds, but if you are on dialysis or any type of or often chemo and things, all of the deductibles are waived for that. T1D does not have it, which it's not there yet.
Right. Thank you, Gerri. And Doreen has asked, are there any changes to PharmaCare in 2024?
They're going to surprise us.
Stay tuned.
I think there is always a push. If you want to predict what it is, so I hear somebody is looking for FIAS. If there is a push with a lot of people pushing to get FIAS covered, you may find there will be an announcement. Usually, for instance, when they changed from funding Atlantis to Basaglar, it was predictable. Basaglar was cheaper. They were going to Basaglar. When they stopped funding Humalog and went to a Demilog, it was money. So you can predict that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any other drug right now that is coming online that's cheaper. But if it does come online and it's cheaper, you probably can predict that it's going to happen. The push should come from you, me, your doctor, whoever, your relatives. Phone the health minister, write letters, vote, ask questions, but it's a long process. I was thinking when SGLT2s came in, T1D people usually don't take it, but things like Jardiance and Invocana, we were the last province to fund that. Invocana and Jardiance has become the drug of choice to start if you've got a cardiac, but we still didn't fund it until just very recently, and we were the last province. It takes a lot.
Great, thank you for covering all of that, Gerri. The next question here is from Anonymous, and it's, are the pharmacies allowed to apply markup on items fully covered by provincial health coverage? For example, Dexcom sensors. This markup compels the patient to pay something out of pocket, as these are neither covered by private insurance nor by government.
The short answer is yes, they are allowed. That's why Shoppers is more expensive than Costco, and is, you know, yes, they are, and they're shop around.
There's a recognizable, acceptable markup that is allowed by insurance plans. So whether it be, it can go anywhere from 10% up to 40%, depending on what the item is. And it's very difficult from our end trying to negotiate where one plan will accept a 20% markup, but another plan will accept a 10% markup, and then what cost on all of that gets passed to the patient. And there's also set fees that are different for each plan. So whether that's a Pharmacare has a $10 fee. So when Gerri's saying the Shoppers Drug Mart fee is $14, you as a cash payer pay the $14 fee. As Pharmacare, once you've hit coverage with Pharmacare, you don't pay that extra. They cannot pass that extra amount along to you. You have 100% coverage with Pharmacare. Any extra markups or fees don't go towards you. And if you are getting charged them, then that's something that you need to look into.
But you would still pay the higher fee until your deductible is gone.
Yes.
Thank you both for answering that question. The next one here is asking if the Tandem will eventually be covered by Pharmacare.
I have made several calls for Tandem because Tandem IQ is a closed loop. And at this point, I feel like I'm wasting my breath. Now, Elizabeth may have a different opinion, but so far I haven't seen it happening. However, something that I've found is if you have a high enough deductible, it may be economical for you to use Tandem as opposed to Omnipod, which is covered or included in the deductible. If you're never going to get coverage from the Fair Pharmacare, then do the math and see if it makes more sense for you to use something that isn't covered under Fair Pharmacare. When I did the math for someone who had a deductible of $7,000 or $8,000, they were going to end up paying for everything themselves. And even though they paid for the Tandem pump themselves over the course of 5 years, they actually saved money because with Tandem, you can leave the pump on for longer. It has more in the pump for the time. So you really have to figure out what your costs are going to be.
Thank you, Gerri. Elizabeth, did you want to add anything to that question?
With the Tandem, you have to get your products through Diabetes Express Bayshore. So we can't order them unless there's a different pharmacy chain that's able to do that. Through our wholesalers, it has to be Same with the Omnipod, it goes direct bill through Bayshore.
Excellent. Thank you both. The next question here is submitted by Anonymous. It says, my Green Shields plan doesn't provide much coverage for Tresiba. Is there another long-acting insulin that is covered that is similar, that is on the pharmacare list that works the same?
So you said that they're not covered for Tresiba?
Their Green Shields plan does not provide much coverage for it, no.
Elizabeth might be able to answer that one. I think the only one I would suggest is Basaglar, because nothing else is covered.
Tresiba company had a card that they were paying for 100% of the cost for almost 2 years worth, and it just recently ended, and we were so sad about that because it was wonderful. But Green Shield was probably cutting back the amount that they're paying to the cost of the Basaglar, because that's their reference-based drug. So they'll pay the Basaglar cost of the Tresiba.
So for the most part, if you are going to get coverage, it's through a program that the company offers, not through Fair Pharmacare.
Okay. So thank you both. The last question in this section is another one from Anonymous. And it says, when will Medtronic sensors be covered, and how to overturn Dexcom monopoly on BC market?
A lot of the Dexcom stronghold, really, the Dexcom taking over, is because of the financial agreements that they have entered into with Fair Pharmacare. If it makes financial sense for Fair Pharmacare to cover Dexcom, because Dexcom is giving a very good price to our Fair Pharmacare, then that's the one that's covered. If Medtronic comes in with a price that Fair Pharmacare agrees to, at that point it would be covered. But right now, it will be a long time before Dexcom or before Fair Pharmacare covers Medtronic. It's all financial agreements with the Fair Pharmacare and the companies. The price at which Fair Pharmacare pays and the price that we pay for Dexcom isn't the same.
Great. Thank you, Gerri. I'll move us into our next section here, which is also our last. And I do apologize, we will be going over a little bit here. This last one is navigating specific situations. So the first one is from Anonymous and says, how can I get my endo to prescribe an insulin pump for me covered by pharmacare?
I guess ask them. You go in and suggest to the endocrinologist that you would like to try it. And the one that is covered is Omnipod at this point. If you have an allergy to Freestyle, you won't be able to wear an Omnipod. And I've had a few clients like that, and I tried to get a different pump, and I was unsuccessful. Omnipod and Freestyle use an isorbate acetate adhesive, and there is a significant number of people who have an allergy to that and can't wear them. But we can't get any other pump.
Right. Thank you for answering that. The next one here is another one from Anonymous, and it says, do you have any advice for recent retirees?
Get a income review quickly. Ask for it. You have to sign for it. Get the income review. And if your income has reduced by 10%, then your deductible will go down.
Thank you, Gerri. And Elizabeth, did you have anything to add to those latest questions I see back here.
Sorry, I had to leave the room. I missed the question.
Oh, no worries. I just wanted to see if there was anything that you were waiting to add there.
There is a way that you guys can check whether you have a special authority without having to call into PharmaCare. There's a Health Gateway app or a patient portal that you can go through your BC Services account. And when you load it up, there's a section where you can click special authority, and it will tell you when the drug was approved or the device was approved and when the special authority expires. So for your 5-year CGM, you can keep tabs and see. But also when those special authorities, every time we run through a prescription, it very quickly flashes up on the screen when the special authority expires. So we can look back, we can rerun it to see where that date is. At our store, we're trying to add that into the patient file so that we can keep tabs on it as well too.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right, moving into our last question that was submitted beforehand is from Anonymous, and it says, I'm no longer working, off on disability, and I had to personally purchase private health insurance coverage within a limited amount of time after leaving group coverage with employer. Otherwise, I would have had to go through a medical, etc., and likely wouldn't get it. After much research, I went with Green Shield and currently pay over $500 a month. Is there a way to leave Green Shield and go with another company if one comes along at a lower cost without having to do medicals?
Not to my knowledge. It's the private insurance companies, Green Shield, Blue Cross, Canada Life, you name it, all get to make their own rules. So that if they have, that I often see these ads that there are no medicals, you would never have to answer any medical questions. Yeah, there's something wrong there. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. So chances are, if you don't have to go through a medical, you really want to look at what sort of coverage and what sort of rules that are around that, and when they can get out of paying you, to see if it really makes any sense.
Great. Thank you, Gerri. I will move into my first one here in the chat now, and that is, what is Claim Secure Patient Assistance? I've received it very sporadically on some purchases, in addition to my private insurance and PharmaCare.
I'm going to let Elizabeth answer that. She can probably do better at that one.
Yeah, there are two groups. There's the Claim Secure group, and then there's an OV Cares, and they're plans that are purchased or paid for by the brand name company to get their brand name product out at about the same price as the generic product. So if you had Crestor brand name versus the generic rosuvastatin product, this company, I call them a company card, so they help to pay most of the difference based on the Canadian national average for the generic cost. We found that the brand name keeps going up and the generic price keeps dropping. So if you have this help card, it won't always cover the full difference, so be prepared at some point you're going to have to pay. But now there's the Dexcom is paying for up to 25% of each fill, and the Freestyle Libre is also paying, I believe, anywhere from 15 to 25. I've never filled one, so I don't know exactly what number it is per fill. So those are either billed through Claim Secure or an OV Cares Express Scripts. So I add them onto everyone's file that comes through my door, so that they're there if they need them. Other pharmacies, you might have to ask for the patient support card or download your own card to, and I can put the links for that in the chat, but you can download your own card and it will keep going until the company ends it.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. And sorry, Gerri, is it okay going over the time right now if we just have a
Sure,
couple more
I'm good.
questions in the
I'm
chat?
good. I'm good.
All right. Next up in the chat is, do you know any cases where FIASP is approved by Fair Pharmacare? I have ADHD and FIASP improves my quality of life significantly.
In our office, we have sent in several requests for special authority for Humalog, for FIASP, for other. I've been reading in the chat that a couple of people have gotten special authority. Our office has never been able to, and I've made the phone calls, and it just, I never see it. Now, Elizabeth may have seen it in her practice.
They did have an extension when Trurapi and Admelog came on board. They weren't technically having the approval for pump use, so Pharmacare carried the coverage for the Novo Rapid and for the Humalog over. It ended at the end of November of 2023, though. So up until then, you should have had some equivalent coverage, but from now, you will have no coverage, not even a partial. It's no coverage for brand name Humalog or Novo Rapid. You will have Trurapi and you'll have Admelog as a full benefit with Pharmacare, but FIASP is covered by First Nations Health, I believe, as a portion. They used to, I'm not sure if they still are anymore.
It depends on which band.
Okay. But it's a provincial-wide coverage, so
Yeah.
it would be worth looking into. If you have First Nations Health coverage, you might be able to get FIASP as an alternative.
Thank you both. The next question I have here is referring to the question surrounding the advice for new retirees, and that is, how soon can you ask for an income review? By example, if I retire tomorrow, how will they determine my new reduced income?
My understanding is that they will ask you for a consent, and then you will have to submit some type of proof, say a check stub, etc. But the Fair Pharmacare will ask for it. I would suggest submitting it or getting the process started before you retired, because the consent process takes a few weeks. If you request a consent for it, it takes a couple of weeks to get out, and then you send it back, and then they have to process it. So if you want your deductible done quickly, get it started early-ish. I don't think you can start it as much as 6 months prior, but certainly if you're retiring in February, I'd start it now. Get the consent process started.
Thank you, Gerri. And now I will just read off our last question in the chat, which is, with my last employer, everything was covered through my group insurance, Lantus, Nova Rapid, and Dexcom. Which of these do I need special authority for? I've never worried about that before since my work plan covered it all 100%.
The CGM, the Dexcom, would need it. There is no special authority for Lantus. The Fair Pharmacare covered for Glargine, which is Lantus and Basaglar. Fair Pharmacare only covers Basaglar. If the family doctor is writing the prescription for Basaglar, you will need special authority. If your endo is writing it, you don't need special authority. If you notice that your pharmacist said you don't have special authority and you knew that that was an endocrinologist, mention it to your pharmacist and they can perhaps help you. And if not, phone Fair Pharmacare and said, this was written by an endo, it shouldn't need special authority. I don't think any of the other meds you could get special authority for.
Great. Thank you so much, Gerri and Elizabeth, for answering all of those questions. And it was great reading through everyone chatting in the chat box there as well and providing each other advice and experiences. A huge thank you again to Gerri for leading this month's huddle and sharing her expertise on navigating the T1D insurance coverage landscape. Thank you everyone for attending tonight. We really hope you enjoyed the session, and I thank you for sticking with me through my first official huddle. We are continuously working on improving the huddle sessions, and we'd love to hear from you. If you have 5 minutes to spare, please consider filling out this short feedback survey. We look at every single comment, and your suggestions help shape the huddle. If you have troubles accessing the survey, you can also contact our huddle coordinator, Soraya, who has been sending you emails, and we'll have it in the chat. Thank you, everyone.
Great job. Thanks, everybody.